Hello, these are Flip Notes 0.8 on ethics and psychological research. We've made it to the end of Unit 0. Let's get going.
So ethics, we're talking about morals, what is okay, not just what's legal, but what is ethically okay. We have questions about, is it okay to deceive people? What about animal research? It is the APA, the American Psychological Association, that sets the ethical standards for research, but also universities and different groups on the local level will also have their own standards for what is okay. But usually those standards will fall within the APA, and then they might be even more strict. And then overall, the goal is to make sure that both human and animals are treated with dignity and research is done in a safe way. All right, so there are just a few that we'll go over. The first is informed consent. If anybody is going to be part of a research study, you have to get their permission. And not just get their permission, but you've got to tell them what it is you're doing. They should never be coerced into participating in research. So this makes payment in regards to research a little bit difficult to kind of determine. But generally, if there's payment involved, people are told that they will get the payment whether or not they decide to complete the study. That way, they are not pressured to stay in the study for money. That if they're uncomfortable with the study, they can still leave. They should be informed in advance about anything in the study that might affect their willingness to cooperate. So, for example, if it's a study with a new drug, they're going to be trying out a new medication. You've got to tell them every potential thing that could happen. That's going to affect my decision of whether or not when I want to be in this study. Now I know it's an experimental drug, but I still deserve to know what are the potential side effects. If the a potential side effect is that I might have a headache, okay, if the potential side effect is diarrhea explosively regularly, no, thank you. I don't want to be in that study. So you need to tell them what they're getting in for. And they have to be permitted to withdraw from a study at any time. If they're in the study, I realize I've been taking this medicine for a week. I don't like this. I'm done. Then I get to quit the study. Or if I get into it, there cannot be a pressure for them to stay in there. So informed consent, you're getting their permission, but there's a lot more to it than that.
So, what happens when your participants are too young to give consent? Lots of research is done in developmental psychology that involves children. And while parents can give consent, informed assent is giving consideration to whether or not the children want to participate as well. So, this is for kids who are under the age of 18. And to determine assent, it's actually pretty subjective. The kids have to be mature enough to understand what's going on generally in the trial and what they might be required to do. And then you'd have to observe things like basically, do they seem okay with participating? Are they smiling? Are they active in participation? Are they engaging? Or is it clear that they do not want to participate? That they're frowning, they're crying, they're walking away, they're being avoidant.
The next one is do no harm, and this is a big one. They should not be exposed to harmful or dangerous research procedures. So that seems pretty obvious that we're not going to do anything that's really going to hurt them or put them in danger. But it's kind of that what is the operational definition of harm? And that's where it gets a little bit difficult here. So it's not just physical harm, it's also psychological harm. You have to protect them from stressful situations. So some of the studies that we'll talk about, we'll say, is that really unethical? And stress definitely does not pass in a lot of these review boards. So even stressful procedures that might cause emotional discomfort are largely prohibited. But with a modest risk of a moderate mental discomfort, it may be acceptable, especially if you're warning people ahead of time that this could be stressful. This could cause you some anxiety. If they're still willing to be in it, okay, if they're being upfront with it. So sometimes, you have to have a little bit of stress in some kinds of studies or research, but you got to get that informed consent to go with that. The next step is debriefing. So let's say you do have to deceive them about something. Sometimes you just can't do a study where people know what's going on. So if some deception is necessary about something that didn't involve a risk, you can't lie to them about something that would have otherwise kept them from being in the study. You have to go back afterwards and tell them what the study was actually about, what you did lie about, and that's called debriefing. So deception has to be disclosed in a debriefing session as soon as it's practical. So it may not be that day because maybe you're still doing the study for a few more, you're doing the study multiple times. Maybe I did an experiment with one class and I got to wait till all the other classes have gone through it. But you have to go back and tell them what you were studying, what was the point of the research, and especially if there was anything that you deceived them about. So, yes, you can deceive, but it can't be about anything that would have got them to not want to be in the experiment. Privacy, you have to respect the privacy of those involved. Information about a subject that might be acquired during a study must be treated as highly confidential and should never be made available without their consent. So this could be anything from just their name, that they were in the study, that if you're going to publish your research, you can't use their names unless they say it's okay. Their IQ scores, maybe their weight, maybe just their preferences or their image. All of that is their private information, and you have to get their permission to share that information. Animal research. What about harmful things that can be done to animals? Harmful or painful procedures imposed on animals have to be justified in terms of what we're going to gain from the study. Sometimes it's a matter of like consciously damaging a part of their brain and removing that part of the mouse's brain or an animal's brain to see what would happen. What's the effect of that? Because we can't do that to a human first, but we can try to test it on an animal. And it would really benefit humans. Or maybe it's a medication that and usually most of those medications are going to be tested there first. Like, what is the effect on the animal before we try it on a human? So you have to justify that there was going to be enough gain to justify the treatment of the animal. Laboratory animals are entitled to decent living conditions, and it's usually way more than just decent. They're like very nice living conditions that are spelled out in detailed rules that relate to their housing, cleaning, feeding, etc. So the APA is pretty strict on their rules about how you house the animals, how you feed them, how often you clean their cages. A lot of times, college students who may work in research labs, part of their job is really, really maintaining good lab conditions these animals are treated really well. So it's a pretty big deal when that is violated. And then the next one is that research has to be approved. Actually, this is the last one, I think. Yes. So prior to conducting studies, you have to get research approval. Usually it's from whoever is hosting the research. So if it's at a university, they usually have their own research review committees. And sometimes if it's a really big study, then it'll be the APA, or maybe they'll refer to the APA if they think it's going to be a big study and they're not really sure what should be done with it. Research results should be reported fully and accurately, and raw data should be shared with other professionals. So it's really important to share your research, even if it was unsuccessful. If I am trying out this new medication and I find out it doesn't work, that doesn't just mean it was a total failure. I mean, it is disappointing that it didn't work, but I need to share that with other people so that they don't waste time trying the same thing. Or if there was something really, I discovered something important, not what I was looking for, but it was still important, then they'll be able to read about that and maybe they can figure out what they need to do differently. If I publish my research and then later on I realize something was wrong, like let's say I think that I did cure a type of cancer, and then I realized later on, there's a side effect that this medication, it also makes you go blind 6 months later. But I'm not just going to keep that a secret. I need to publish that follow up. And if there was something that was just wrong in my research, I need to publish a retraction. A retraction is when you go back and say there was a mistake or something was reported incorrectly. So that should be made if there's significant errors in a study subsequent to, which means after its publication.
The research review committees are generally called IRBs, or Institutional Review Boards. This is not any one specific board, it's just a generic term. Most universities and different research companies have what are called IRBs. So their job is to make sure that whatever a proposed study is doing is going to follow all the ethical standards.